Hi there, and thank you so much for joining me today. We are going to be talking about self compassion today, and I can assure you this is not just a nice, cute, fuzzy little concept or practice. It is research based, and it's shown to make a significant difference in people's lives in their capacity to handle big challenges and changes in their lives. So, if you are listening to this, I am sure it applies to you because we are all on this planet experiencing the large scale challenges and changes. And in many cases, a lot of us are also experiencing all manner of personal challenges and changes as well. So, good reasons to listen. Self compassion is also shown to help lower depression, anxiety, and overall stress. And I'm going to talk more about some of the physiological changes that we create when we practice self compassion. And then I'm going to share 6 specific practices or tools that you can use to build your self compassion. So, welcome to the show for all of us. This show is about feeling better in body, mind, and spirit in all the ways. The show is called For All of Us because it is for all of the people, not this kind of person or that kind of person. And it's for all of the pieces of who we are because we're not just one thing. We are a lot of layers and parts and pieces that make us up. And so I hope to help you feel better in all those different ways. And so, oh, and I'm Sarah Moran. My background is in journalism, reporting and writing about self care, as well as teaching and doing workshops on these kinds of topics. And so, real quick, I just want to go into what do I mean by self compassion? And that is quite simply having compassion for yourself with, what you're feeling, with how you're feeling, with what you are experiencing. It's about meeting yourself where you are, accepting what is really true for you, and showing yourself kindness and loving support in how you treat yourself and how you talk to yourself and how you talk about yourself. Self compassion is not to be confused with selfishness or avoiding taking responsibility for yourself and your choices. It's not to be confused with avoiding necessary repairs that you may need to make or changes you may need to make. It's also not to be confused with staying stuck in feeling sorry for yourself or with being lazy or weak or anything like that. And in reality, the research actually shows the opposite of this, that when people have more self compassion, they are actually better able to grow and make more positive changes more easily and more readily. And so it can create that upward trajectory. And we know that actually being hard on ourselves actually keeps us down. And so lacking compassion for yourself can just lead to a lot of self judgment and rumination. It can create insecurity and shame. And being harsh actually is discouraging for people and it lowers their motivation. And it also just kind of interferes with the capacity to integrate our life experiences and grow from difficulty. So, if I were to try to illustrate self compassion, as a being or something, I think I would illustrate it as like this warm fairy godmother type who's always there if you're feeling overwhelmed or sad, you're worried about the future, you're really mad, or you're feeling jealous, or you feel like you failed, you messed it all up, you did something foolish, or daily life is just too much for you, or you're facing a hard decision, you don't know what to do, or this deep dream in your heart just got dashed. And there's this fairy godmother there who kind of wraps you in a warm blanket and listens to you, listens intently and kindly and without judgment, and maybe says, "They're there now, dear. It'll all be okay," with a little pat, and brings you some warm tea or some nice cocoa. And so I picture self compassion as sort of being that for ourselves in big ways and in small ways. It could be the littlest thing like, oh, I just had a conversation with someone and I feel like I was misunderstood, or I didn't quite say what I wanted to, or it came off the wrong way. And we can still, in these little moments, be that fairy godmother self for ourselves. So it's really about responding to yourself with what is true for you and what you are experiencing with kindness, with compassion, with warmth, and with love, in the same way that you would support or respond to a dear friend or animal companion who's going through something challenging or difficult. And then from that space of compassion, then you're better able to actually move through the challenge or the challenging emotions. And that's why self compassion is one of my kind of most basic tips for working with emotions effectively. And because not only are you able to move through those emotions, but you're able to then grow or to heal and meet whatever the goal is, or make progress toward whatever the thing is that's meaningful to you. And one thing I want to say about self compassion is it really is a practice. And so it takes time. It's a muscle that you build, and it's something that you can develop over time with intention and practice. So fear not if it's not something that comes easily to you, or it's a challenge for you, or it just doesn't feel natural. I was thinking about this topic, and I think I probably first came across self compassion as a concept maybe close to 15 years ago at this point. And it is not something that comes easily for me. And, in many ways, I can hold myself lightly and have a sense of humor about myself in some ways. But in other ways, I can be really hard on myself and struggle with self compassion. And so I have to have like self compassion for myself about my struggles with self compassion. So, I get to practice it, and I have practiced. And I don't always remember, and it isn't always easy. It doesn't always feel like it's sinking in, but at least I have that awareness and that intention out there, and I can kind of say to myself, I'm doing the best that I can with it. And just knowing that it's a step in a process is kind of helpful. So let's talk just a little bit more about why we care about self compassion. And I'm going to share some fun facts with you. There are more than 4,000 studies about self compassion at this point. In one meta analysis, which just means they took a whole bunch of studies and kind of summarized them, this meta analysis included more than 16,000 people, and they showed a very clear connection between self compassion and well being. And then we also know, as I mentioned earlier, that self compassion lowers depression, anxiety, and overall stress. And research shows that self compassion boosts people's happiness, it boosts self confidence, and it improves immune function and resilience. And it also decreases the stress hormone cortisol, and it increases feel good hormone oxytocin. So it kind of creates a calming effect, which then it makes sense that it helps to calm intense emotions versus, not having self compassion. Things can really escalate or kind of snowball. So this helps kind of calm that down. And self compassion is shown to help people meet health related goals. So when people are trying to create better habits around healthy lifestyles or, recover from an addiction, it's very supportive. And then it also helps protect people against making comparisons, comparing yourself with others, self consciousness, rumination towards yourself, anger, and closed mindedness. So we all benefit from self compassion. So if we're feeling, thrown off or upset by a challenge with our health or our finances or a certain relationship that's just always throwing us for a loop, or a situation with a child, or some dynamic at work, maybe some disappointment or something that fell through, when we're feeling scared or hopeless, helpless, trapped, embarrassed, any of that, any sort of internal or external situation that's kind of calling for our attention, this is one of those foundational building blocks, is to, work with self-compassion. And it's interesting, there are many of us who can be deeply compassionate to other people or to other beings, to the animals, to the plants, to the planet, and yet have a very hard time showing ourselves compassion. And so I want to tell you some reasons for that, because it seems odd if you stop and think about it. Why are we sometimes so hard on ourselves? And it seems like something like compassion and being kind to ourselves should just be built in, and sort of inherent for us, like something we're equipped with. But it isn't. And so I want to share with you some reasons for that, of why it can be harder, so that maybe it helps you be gentler with yourself, because the last thing we need is like another, oh, now I have to do this self-compassion thing that I haven't been doing, and here's another thing I'm bad at, oh, self-compassion, or another thing I have to work on, self-compassion. So then it can end up just making us feel worse. And so I just want to kind of go through some reasons why it can be hard, and that's my intent anyway, because then uh, hopefully it gives you a little more grace with yourself. And again, in part two of this, I'll be sharing the practices. I think I have 6 that I'm gonna pick out to share with you guys, but just want to give some background in this episode. So, one of the first reasons it can be hard is just when we're going through challenging times, like when you're up against the edges of your emotional capacity and you're feeling overwhelmed, you're under prolonged stress. And of course, that's when we need it the most. But unfortunately, this is when your prefrontal cortex, which is kind of the part of your brain associated with the executive functions, so that's helping you with higher level thinking and regulation of your emotions and self control, inhibition, problem solving. Chronic, ongoing, or really high stress can impair the function of the prefrontal cortex. And so that kind of makes it harder to regulate. And it's almost like you can go into overdrive, like think of a computer heating up and overworking, and it can go into this like overanalyzing, overthinking, ruminating, self-blame, self-judgment, just trying to figure out, what did I do wrong, what if I would have done this, that sort of thing. And then also under chronic stress or really intense stress, we activate the amygdala, which is kind of the fear center in the brain, that's about safety and survival, and that activates fight or flight and processes emotions. And that part of the brain can override the prefrontal cortex too, so override your more rational, thinking mind. So then that makes it harder for us to do the self-talk around self-compassion. It makes it harder for us to engage in a practice like self-compassion. So, ironically, when we need it the most, it can be the hardest. So this is why it's good to kind of practice and cultivate it when things aren't really intense for you, and just build that muscle whenever you can. Second, if we did not feel safe and secure growing up, especially in our formative years, if we did not feel generally seen or heard, understood, emotionally supported in our concerns, or if we were dismissed with our concerns, belittled, made fun of, shamed for our experiences or feelings, or learned to repress or suppress emotions or feel bad about having them. Third, related, if we experience messaging, especially in the formative years, that we're inherently bad or wrong for being who we are or how we are. And this messaging can come from family systems, it can come from religious systems, education or school systems, and just kind of social dynamics and experiences as well. Another reason, if we have perfectionist tendencies and kind of a strong inner critic, if we have unrealistically high expectations for ourselves. And then another reason is if we experience a lot of emotional intensity and or are highly sensitive and or are neurodivergent and or are empathic, and all of these things often overlap. There's quite a lot of overlap in that realm. I will love to do some episodes about these topics in the future, and I'll try not to digress too much. But in short, sensitivity, that's a feature of a lot of what I'm describing here, is a lot about depth of processing. And processing deeply can correlate with experiencing a lot of things more thoroughly and deeply and intensely including an intensity of emotion. So feeling things intensely. And this isn't all bad. This is experiences of wonder, experiences of beauty, experiences of creativity and imagination will go with emotional intensity, but so too then do the challenging emotions. And in addition, people who are highly sensitive and or neurodivergent, they have differences in the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. And I mentioned earlier how those parts of the brain can tie into how easy or difficult self-compassion can be. And so it can be more challenging if you are highly sensitive or neurodivergent, to have compassion toward yourself. And on a similar note, if we feel different or have felt judged by others for our differences, if we have felt judged for being ourselves or for not meeting other people's expectations, that can make it harder for us to have compassion for ourselves. And that could be a whole other topic too, but there's a saying that Dr. Dane of Access Consciousness says, sort of like a tagline that I would like to share here because I really like it. And it's essentially, what if you, truly being you, are the difference, the change, and the gift this world requires? So I'll say that one more time. What if you, truly being you, are the difference, the change, and the gift this world requires? And then another reason it can be challenging is if we're not used to noticing or acknowledging our emotions. If we're not super in tune with how we are really doing deep down. I have been eager to share with you about self-compassion for a long time, but I wanted to do the episode I did two before, which is about noticing and identifying emotions first, because I realized that you have to notice what you're experiencing in order to then move to the step of having compassion for yourself about it. And if you're not even aware of it, it will impact you and kind of run the show behind the scenes in a way that may not benefit you. But if you are aware, then you can move to things like self-compassion, and then from there use, various other tools and methods to work through something. Again, this can be big or small. It doesn't have to be a huge life-changing thing. It can be the tiniest little thing that just you realize like tweaks you a little bit, like makes you feel a little bit off kilter. So yeah, I would invite you to go back and listen to that episode about my emotions tip 1, episode 14, about noticing and identifying. And many of us are just not brought up in environments that focus on this or in a culture that teaches this, and we're moving more towards that. But I think we have a long, long way to go in a more thorough and complete understanding of how do we work with our emotions and the energy behind that. And last, another reason that self-compassion can be hard is if you are simply part of this modern world, period. And especially the marketing. There are so many messages in our various forms of media and advertising that are so deeply damaging and make people feel less than and like they are lacking in this way or that way, or their life doesn't measure up to the picture that's been created of what it's supposed to be. And I'll just give you a small example with myself where a certain online platform, has identified my gender and age bracket. And so I'm, getting the appropriate targeted ads. And it's amazing how many problems I didn't know I had that they want to bring to my attention to sell something in the advertising that pops up, and how much that can make people self-conscious about how you're supposed to look and how you're supposed to be, and it's, again, creating problems that you didn't actually had, but turning them into problems. And of course, whatever is being marketed or advertised has a solution for us. So I just highly recommend, for so many reasons of your well-being, if there's any opportunity to delete advertising and marketing from your life, please do so. And of course, there are so many wonderful people and businesses who are doing really important and amazing work And that's not what I'm talking about. But the mainstream of what's out there is pretty negative messaging. And if you're kind of being bombarded by what you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to look like and being told that's not enough in all of these indirect small ways everywhere you go, that's going to make it harder to have compassion for yourself too, because it's something that digs at people's self-worth. So be conscious of that and how much these messages do subtly influence us. And also, if you have children, anything you can do to avoid any of that as well, I highly recommend it. So that's a bit of a tangent, but I think it's important here. So all right, so in all of these reasons I just described of, situations or reasons that can make it hard to have self-compassion, I've probably covered just about everybody. So in short, if it's not doesn't feel natural to you, you're not alone. And I would just, invite you to get comfortable with the fact that we have all these different emotions, not to judge them, but rather to see them as a message and something that's calling for our tending. And you can check out my episodes about emotions. Episode 4 is another one, which is called A New Look at Emotions. And then in part 2 of this self compassion episode, I will share. I have 6 practices I think I want to tell you guys about. And they're not just, mental practices, they're not just thinking practices, but I really want to bring in more of actually working with the energy of the heart and the energy body and some of the other pieces, because I think a lot of times our culture can get too stuck in the head and like we're trying to solve problems, thinking problems by thinking, and sometimes there's other ways to maneuver with that. So I want to give you a lot of options so you can feel into in a different situation what is the best match for you, because we're all unique. So you can see what works for you, and I'm hoping that at least one of the things I share will be helpful for you. And I just want to thank you also again for taking the time to listen to this. I do hope that it was helpful. And if you know someone you think would benefit from it, I hope you'll share, pass this along. A reminder, this is free to listen to or watch on any of the platforms if you have or use YouTube or Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can subscribe and, click to get notifications or follow the show. And then I am uploading videos on Substack. And so if you want to check that out, it's substack.com/at for all of us. And basically you can sign up for the free option to just receive an email when there's a new episode. And so yeah, that's all I got for now. Thanks again for taking the time. Next time we'll talk about those 6 ways that you can improve or work with your self-compassion to help you feel better. And for now, just kind of take note of how you talk to yourself about your different experiences, about, both your inner challenges and also kind of external challenges. All right, take care now. Thanks. Bye-bye.